Okay, so hello and welcome back to another Unity tutorial about scriptable objects. In this one I'm going to be showing you how to create your own input manager with key bindings, and there are other ways of doing this normally, but honestly they're so convoluted and overcomplicated. This is a super simple way of doing it, and because you do it with a scriptable object, if you make changes it saves. And it's just really good for storing user preference things. There are obviously the built-in player prefs, but that doesn't really work for a you can use it for key bindings, but it's just an extra step. And believe me, after you've watched this, you'll see how much simpler it is by using scriptable objects to store your key bindings. So currently, in my game at least, the way I've got key bindings, obviously, first of all, is for doing stuff like spaces, jump as you see on the right, jump, and so on. But it also displays, for example, when I want to pick something up, it tells me what the actual interact button is. I mentioned this in the other video, but in case you've not seen the other one, I'd recommend go watching it. It's just an introduction to scriptable objects. Let's say I wanted to change it to N, and I go back into the game, it's now N to pick up. Obviously, I still need to add a settings menu on here so that I can change it in the game, but the point holds, because all the settings menu will do when I change the key binding will change this anyway. So let's just put the interact back to E, because I want it on E. So yeah, I'm going to show you how to make your own input manager like this, and it's quite easy. You just need two scripts, and one is for the scriptable object. So let's get into it. Let's stop this and go back. So this is from yesterday. Sorry about the police outside, not outside my house. We're going to create the input manager, and we're going to use it to, I don't know, change something on the screen, just to show the concept of making your input. So first of all, we're going to create a script called input manager. Why not? Input manager. Open that up, and we're also going to create another script, so just let that happen. Go back to Unity, this one. Come on. We're going to create a C# script. Now this one is going to be an actual scriptable object script, so we're going to call it Keybindings or something. Now the best thing about it being a scriptable object class as well, like this, is you can store multiple different objects with different persons' key bindings on. So if you have a game where multiple people might sign in on the computer or whatever, you can store different persons' key bindings. Now, for key bindings, that might not be as useful. I mean, it will be, I guess, if different people prefer different key bindings. But it'll be especially useful for just settings in general. Like some people might like the audio different, or the kind of thing where if you have someone sharing the computer with you and you want to use different settings, that's the main advantage, I guess. But for input it's really good anyway. So let's go to the key binding script. Now for key bindings we need to store something. Obviously a scriptable object, so let's go scriptable object. If you don't get what I'm doing really, then go watch the video from yesterday. You'll see the introduction. So we're going to create in the asset menu a thing for key bindings so that we can make objects for the key bindings. So file name, we're going to call it Keybindings. Why not? And then for the menu name, we'll just call it Keybindings, I guess. Why not? Keybindings. Okay. And that's that. So now if we go into the Unity, when it's compiled, we'll be able to create an object for the... Yeah, after this video, I'm going to sort all this stuff into folders. So we can create a new Keybindings, and we'll just call it Keybindings. Why not? You'll want to have different. If you're gonna have multiple of them, then have different names. Currently, it stores no data, so let's code the. Whoops, that's from my other game. Okay, so we're gonna write the data that the key binding stores. So we're gonna store a public key code, because that's the type. That's what an input is. If you have inputs are key codes, and the thing is, well, I put in there. Sorry. We need to think of a variable name. Now, we could have a list of key codes, but I'm going to have just separate variables. Now, rather than writing public key code jump, now here you want to write all the different things you want input for, apart from maybe movement, because that's always going to be WASD and arrow keys, unless you want a different kind. I guess that's up to you. Rather than writing public key code jump, semicolon, public key code, you can just do public key code jump, comma, and then interact, comma, pause, comma, inventory, comma, spell, but you get what I'm saying. So for everything you want a key binding for, just add it here. Now, if you go back into Unity, you'll see on these objects now, they will store for each of those variables a key code. And the key code options are all the possible inputs that, well, Unity handles. So we've got these keys here, obviously escape, pause, return, clear, $hash, whatever. You go down to alpha 0 to 9 is the keyboard number 0 to 9. Obviously on a keyboard it's 1 to 9 to 0, so keep that in mind. Down to the letters. You can't actually scroll in here, can you? It won't let my scroll wheel do it. And then below the letters for the alphabet, you get all the keypad and joystick stuff down there. So they have basically everything that you can ever use. It's the same as using the input manager normally, except from this is adding key bindings in. So for jump, you might want space. Whoops. Oh, space right at the top. Okay, sorry. Interact, I'm going to go for what I usually use, which is E. Then pause can be escape. Inventory can be I or B. I guess B for bags, I for inventory. Spellbook can be P. There you go. So you got your key bindings for your game all set up like that. That's the default, whatever you want the defaults to be. But now we need to actually have the script. So where's the code? We need the script here. The input manager. So let's go across the input manager. And what do we want to do in this? We want to be able to call it. We want it to be a static class. Now, if you don't already know, a static class is a class, obviously, that there'll only ever be one of, and it's literally just the one instance of this script. So the benefit is, because there's only ever going to be one, you don't have to classify, you don't have to go find reference to it, because it's the only one that exists. So Unity knows this is the only input manager that exists, so when someone's on about an input manager, they're on about this one. Which means it's easier to access it, and there's other benefits. I guess you could argue the only negative is, yeah, you can't have multiple of them, but you're not going to have multiple input managers, at least not in a single player game. And I've done a lot of single player game stuff, but I've not really done any multiplayer. I did a bit on how to like connect a client like server, but I've not actually done any multiplayer games before, so I don't know much about that. But we're going to have a static, so it's public static, obviously. As I said, static. It's what's called a singleton, and a singleton, as I explained, is well, there's only going to be one of it, and that's how it knows which one to reference. And if there's ever more than one, it causes problems, which is why we're going to write a bit of code in a second to stop that. So public static input manager. Also, if you've seen other people do static classes, they'll have done it the same way. You'll recognize it. And we're going to call it instance. So it's the instance of this, the one instance. And we're also going to store a public keybindings. We want reference to keybindings, and we'll just call it, keybindings. Then in the awake function, awake. Whoops. One thing is, I'm going to zoom in. I keep forgetting that, sorry. Okay, so in the awake, we're going to say if, and we want to check when this script is made. We're going to say if instance is equal to null. So we're saying if there is no instance of input manager, then we're going to say the instance is equal to this, which means this input manager. This script here, this one, whatever it's attached to, is the one. Okay, so if it doesn't already exist, we're going to be it. Else, if, so I'm going to say if instance does not equal this, does not equal this, which means that this is saying if it exists but it's something else. So if it's on a different object, destroy this, which means destroy the script. So if the script already exists on something else, we're going to get rid of this one because it already exists. So what this awake does here is it stops there ever being two of it, and it means that there's always going to be one, which is the whole point of it. And then something you see other people adding is don't destroy and load, because it's generally managers like this you want to exist throughout your whole game in every scene and everything. Don't destroy and load means that the object, when you go to a new scene and you load a new scene, it doesn't destroy the object. It persists through scenes. And we're going to write a function for this, and you can write multiple functions for this. We're just going to simply do one. So we'll have a public bool. Because keep in mind, when you use an input manager, normally you would do input.getKey. That's a boolean. You say if input.getKey because you're saying if they're using the key. So this is the same thing. We're going to say if input, we're going to say public bool key down, for example, and we're going to pass in a string. So they're going to write in the key bindings. Well, actually, we'll write it in some other code when we use it. But we'll say input manager.instance.getKeyDown, and we'll pass in a string. And the string is going to be these. So like inside the string, it's going to be like jump or whatever. And I'll show you how that works in a minute. So let's actually write the code here. So we're gonna. Oops, sorry, we already done the brackets. So inside here, this is where we would do a normal input. So normally you do if input dot get key down. But this time, the key that we're getting down is not just the key they pressed. It's going to grab it from the input, from the key bindings. So we're going to say key bindings, which we've got reference to up here, dot check key, which I haven't yet written. So check key. And we're going to pass in key. And then we're just going to say return true, else return false. So basically we're saying if we've pressed the key down and then we're going to search key bindings, we're not going to just check straight into a key, we're going to check key bindings to know what the actual key is. So it's going to say check key input and it's going to return the key for input. I'll explain that in a second. And if we are pressing it, we're going to return true, else return false, which lets the thing calling it know whether we are or are not pressing it. So if we go into here, we're going to have to write a function for checking the key. So if we go here, we're going to say public, and it returns a type key code. So obviously here's you write the return type of it. So normally it would be void if you return nothing, boolean if you return true or false. This is key code because we're going to, if you look at this input manager, the input.getKeyDown, this parameter here takes in a key code, well this bit here, takes in a key code. So we want to return a key code here. And we're going to call it check key, because that's what we called it, why not? And we're taking in a string key. And all we do here is we're going to write a switch statement. Now, a switch statement is basically a nicer way of doing lots of ifs. Rather than saying if check key, or like if key is equal to this, do this. If key is equal to this, do this. Like else if key. Switch is much neater at doing this, and I think it's more efficient if you've got more statements. If you've got one, then an if's fine, but if you've got like 3 or more, I'd say to do a switch. So let's search switch key. Now that basically means that now we're going to do all the stuff in here depending on what key is, and I'll explain that better when we actually write it. So in switches you have cases, so let's put case jump colon return return jump. Okay, now what this is doing is, oh, and sorry, well actually, yeah, we don't need a break because it returns. So basically we're saying we're going to return a type key code, so whatever we return has to be of type key code. It's called check key, that's the name of the function. It's taken in a string, and here is switch and then key, which is the string. So I'm going to write if input manager.instance.checkKey jump. So what it's going to do is it's going to say key is jump. So it's going to check down all the cases that I'm going to write, and it's going to basically say, in the case that key is jump, do this. Okay? In the case that key is jump, do this. In the case that key is, well actually I should do it as a capital, why not? In the case that key is interact, we do this, return interact. Can't type return. In the case that key is pause menu, return pause menu. Well, it's just called pause. Sorry. And so on. So I'll just write the other two quickly. So in the case that key is inventory, return. Why can't I type return today? Return inventory. And then finally, in the case that it's spellbook, return spellbook. And then we also, at the end, are going to have a default case, because the problem now is it's saying not all code paths return a value, because what if key is none of these cases? What if it's not jump, interact, pause, inventory, spellbook? What? Spellbook. We need to have a default case. So if we go to the end and just write default, that means that this is the else. In like a list of ifs, this is what the else is. It's if none of these happen, we're going to do this. This is the last resort. We're going to return. Now you have to return a key code no matter what. You can't return null because null is not a type key code. So we have to return a key code. So key code dot, and luckily enough there is a key code called none, which basically means it's not going to check any key, but it's still a type key code, which is what you have to put in this part. So what's going to happen is we're going to call this function passing in a string, and it's going to say, depending on what our string is that we've put in, it's going to return the key code for it. And the key code is whatever we set in the game and on the scriptable object, right? So we're going to say if input.getKeyDown, and normally you would write in here, you would write like jump, or like you would write whatever you've called them. You would write it as a string, and you would write whatever you've put in your input manager in Unity. So if you went up here and changed your input manager, the problem is you can't change that input manager from code, or at least if you can, it's very awkward to do. And this is like a nicer way to store it. I've never been able to find any tutorials on it, and a good way to do it apart from this, which is the way I came up with, which I'm sure someone else has done before, but I couldn't find any tutorial showing this use of scriptable objects. So if you find it useful and you know someone else doing game development and they need to do key bindings, and this, I would recommend this video. Obviously it's my own video, but honestly, like, this was really helpful when I figured out how to do this. So we're going to check the key, whatever key we've passed in as a string, and it's going to return the key code. Regardless of what it is, it's going to return it. So if we go back here and we go back to our script from yesterday, like the character display, how about we have a function, right? So public void display details. It's just a function, and it's going to do this, right? That's what the function does. And at the start, we're just going to display details. Whoops. Display details, right? But we want to be able to call display details from pressing a button, basically, to update it. So we're going to say if, well, what is it? We'll say if, we need an update. What am I doing? Void update. So in the update function, rather than doing input.getKeyDown, we're going to say input manager .instance .get what I put like key down, and we're going to pass in a string. So we're going to say I haven't actually made one for doing this, so we'll just say interact, right? Why not? We'll say interact. So if we press the interact key, whoops, I need it in an if. What am I doing? So if I've pressed this key, then we're going to say display details. Okay, that's it. So now we're going to go back to Unity, and we're going to press play. No, we're not. We're actually going to go to the one of the odd things in the scene that has got. Where did I put code last time? Usually you would have a game object called like managers. So managers, just have it in the wherever, and then you would just have input manager on it. And all you have to do is set the keybindings object there, and there you go. The keybindings object is not in the scene; it's just there. Now. You see how it says, let's minimize this, sorry. So we've got Bob is a blah, blah, blah. Now if I go to the canvas and I change the test character to test character 1, it doesn't update. But if I press the interact button, it changes to Bill. Now I just press E, okay? And I'm going to put the test character 2 back in. But instead of pressing E, I'm actually going to go to keybindings and change interact to another letter like, I don't know, K. Now I can't really show you, but I'm pressing K, ready? There we go, it changed. So just from changing the scriptable object here, it reads from here whenever I do an input, which, as you can imagine, is extremely helpful. So I can just go and say, actually, no, I want to change it to E. Now, the best way to implement this would be in a pause, like settings menu, so people can change their thing themselves. So obviously, I have no like character movement set up with interaction and inventory in this. I've shown you it working in my game, and this is just working in here. So when you change this, obviously it has changed the object it's using, but the text isn't told to update, so this is just a way of updating it. But yeah, that's an input manager, and obviously you can use this for your own game. It's very simple to implement. This isn't actually the code you really need. This is what you need. So for the key bindings, and you just add to this as you add more key bindings, like more things that need key bindings, and then input manager, boom, simple. If you want to do like, instead of just get key down, you want to do get key, you would just do input.getKey. You would have your own. So you would write like public bool like get key string key if input dot get key, and you would write keybindings dot and then check key and so on. You would say like return true else return false. There you go. So that's how you do a just get key one. So instead of key down, I'd do like get key down. That's like the normal way they write it. But yeah, there you go. So I hope this helped, and I hope you stick around for the other scriptable object videos I'm going to do in the next few days, hopefully, showing the uses of them. Obviously, if you found this useful and you know people who will find it useful, then share it. If you want to see more of my videos, then be sure to subscribe, check them out. Join our Discord server for discussions related to Unity, Discord bots, coding in general, whatever. Obviously, the most I can ask for is for you just to take part in the community and subscribe to the channel. That would mean the most to me. But anyway, yeah, I hope this helped. So thanks for watching, and goodbye.